One of the most common questions I get in my private Facebook group is, how do I handle myself in the middle of a child custody evaluation, what's now called a parenting plan evaluation? They'll say something like, the court has ordered me and my ex to go through a child custody evaluation or a parenting plan evaluation. And the first question I was asked was, please give me a list of 4 parenting skills the other parent has. And I really didn't know how to answer that. Well, this is our topic today. My name is Gretchen Baskerville, and I started leading Christian divorce recovery groups in Southern California churches in 1998. I have spent years listening to women and men who highly value marriage, but have still needed a life-saving divorce. This year, I attended nearly 30 hours of training from the AFCC, an organization that educates professional child custody evaluators. AFCC is short for the Association of Family and Conciliation Courts. I took their official training course earlier this year. It was 28 hours of live seminars and Q&A, and I found it to be quite interesting, especially as it applied to people who are part of conservative faith groups. Now, I didn't do this because I want to become an evaluator. I wanted to understand what this top training organization teaches professionals. And I was grateful they allow non-professionals and even advocates like me to take their training course. This topic hits close to home for me. I went through a forensic 730 psychological evaluation during my high conflict custody battle. And I was one of the fortunate parents who was able to maintain sole custody in the state of California until my youngest child turned 18. I've asked educator and strategy coach Sarah McDugal of Wilderness to Wild to join me. She's experienced years of high conflict custody issues and will share her perspective on how she was able to keep her children safe during the process. Now, just a note, this video provides a solid basic overview, but for a comprehensive deep dive, contact Sarah McDugal for the full 2.5-hour version. The full workshop is available to her strategy coaching clients. Now, while this video covers the essentials, the extended workshop offers far more in-depth guidance, including affordable tools and resources specifically for those navigating contested custody cases. Now, as a general disclaimer, we are not attorneys or evaluators and cannot give legal advice. We're not mental health professionals, cannot give counseling advice. Be sure to talk with a legal expert in your jurisdiction, especially someone who knows your judge or your parenting plan evaluator. First of all, I want to go through some really fast facts, because when I went through a forensic psych eval, I had no idea what I was going to face. My attorney never really told me what was going on. It was absolutely a shock to me that I was being evaluated too. I wasn't the parent with the problem. Why was I being evaluated? I didn't know how these things work. So let me give you really a quick overview of 10 real basic facts about parenting plan evaluations. Okay, number 1, a parenting plan evaluation is the new and preferred term in the court system for what we used to call child custody evaluations. They mean exactly the same thing. The court appoints a specially trained evaluator because you and the other parent can't agree to a custody arrangement. You have one of the 1 in 10 divorces in America involving children where this is the case. The court has no idea which one of you is causing this impasse. The judge often wants an investigation done and a report that gives him or her options for custody recommendations, or maybe even go so far as to answer the ultimate question. That's what they call it, the ultimate question: how much custody time each parent should be granted. Number two, the investigation is court-ordered. The judge orders it, and it is not confidential. It usually evaluates both parents. The evaluator will tell your ex what you said about him or her and about the children. And they will ask your ex for an explanation. It goes the other way too. You will be put on the hot seat and asked to explain or reject your ex's perception about you and the children. After it's completed and read by the judge and the attorneys, and often you, the final report is usually sealed so that the other parent and you cannot use it to influence the children. The report can usually be accessed 2 years after the child ages out. So after the child's majority. In most cases, that would be 2 years after the youngest child turns 18. You will likely be asked by your attorney to go to their office and read and discuss the report, but you will not be given a copy. At least that was my experience, and I understand that is still true today, based on the class I took. Number three, the invoice for the evaluation will be paid in advance, and it's often between $4,000 and $10,000. Often, but not always, split between you and the other parent. But don't be quick to pay the retainer unless the evaluator presents your attorney with a court document showing A, that you must participate, and B, that the evaluation and the evaluator chosen is court ordered, not just someone hired by your ex to find dirt on you and your parenting style. You need to actually have your attorney make sure this is legit. I've actually seen this happen. I've had a situation where I was told it was court ordered and it really wasn't. Number four, the evaluator is likely to record the interviews with you, with the children, and with others. And they will have you sign something saying that you will not record them. Now, this gives them a huge amount of power and you very little. Of course, the recordings can be subpoenaed later. That's a huge expense, and the judge has to agree that there's a good reason. Also, a lot of these evaluators do not want you to email them anything. So if you have documents such as medical records, medical referrals, or a printout of your email interactions or text messages, keep a copy for yourself and hand it to them. You won't get these copies back. As we already said at the top of this workshop, clear this tactic with your attorney, who has probably worked with this evaluator before and with this judge before. That's why you have this attorney. They're an advisor. They're your advocate. Number five, the evaluators are taught not to have a warm and supportive tone. This is a forensic investigation. The process is to assess the best psychological interests of the child or children by focusing on each parent's capabilities, attitudes, and behaviors, and the unique needs of each child. Now, the goal for the court, and this is what the evaluators are taught, is to improve the well-being of the children. So the assessment is done according to very specific standards, guidelines, and methods, and you will find the link to these standards in our download. The evaluator is to follow the court's definition, not yours, of what is in the best interest of your child. Now, if you feel that the PPE, the Parenting Plan Evaluator, has been biased and unprofessional, you can challenge their findings afterwards. But discuss this with your attorney in advance to make sure it's a good tactic. Sometimes the report is strongly in your favor, but it says one or two negative things about you. Just let it go. Don't get too focused on details and miss the big picture. Ask your attorney to explain the results, because sometimes the lingo can be complex. Number six, the evaluation usually takes 30 to 90 days from the first contact to the final report. The final report is usually about 40 to 100 pages long. The evaluator is likely to meet with you alone, you and your children, maybe even you and your ex together, unless there's been physical violence against you. Then they will also come to do a home visit to each parent's home. They're likely to talk by phone with your witnesses, which are called collateral, and they will request a list of collateral, meaning witnesses, and might ask you to limit the list to only about 5 people. So you really want to think through who you want to use as witnesses. Obviously, law enforcement and doctors, sometimes teachers, are going to be your absolute best collateral, not your mom, not your best friend. Number 7, the investigator usually has a master's degree, either in law or in some mental health discipline, and they are licensed by your state in law or mental health. Now, as I mentioned, they may not allow you to send them emails. So ask your attorney how to get medical information and email, text, and voice messages, logs to them. Number 8, in the show notes, I'm going to include a list of facts that the evaluators typically gather. I will also list in the show notes how to prepare for a home visit and the professional standards the evaluators use. Again, it doesn't matter what you think or feel, it's what the court standards are. So you need to know what you're up against. Number 9, there is no special organization that licenses and regulates these parenting plan evaluators. Just your own state's mental health licensing and ethics boards. They are supposed to follow certain documented standards. And as I said, the links to those standards are in the show notes. And then finally, number 10, when sensitive issues come up, such as homeschooling, bed sharing, what we call co-sleeping, vaccinations, and firearms come up, the parenting plan evaluator may not bring it up in their report as long as the other parent has historically agreed to handle it this way. But of course, it's very common for the other parent to change their mind as soon as you file for divorce. So if the parent has always supported it in the past, but has suddenly changed their mind since the divorce, show documentation of strong support prior to the divorce. All right, those are the 10 real basic facts. And now I want to get into the discussion.
Before we move into some incredible discussion questions, I just want to throw out a couple of other things too. If you have a Guardian-ad-Litem instead of a parenting plan evaluator, they still carry that immense amount of weight, and they are still given a lot of power by the court, but the requirements may be slightly different. You may end up waiting months for a written evaluation, a full written report. It may not be the same tight requirements for turnaround time that you would get with a formal PPE or parenting plan evaluator, but they're effectively fulfilling a similar role. So it's really important to know your state's Guardian-ad-Litem requirements and make sure you document any where your Guardian-ad-Litem deviates or fails to fulfill those requirements for their interaction with cases. For example, some states say that as long as a Guardian-ad-Litem is on the case, they need to have contact with the children in the case every month. So let's say it's been 6 months since the Guardian-ad-Litem in your case contacted the children or saw the children, but they're still turning in reports or they're giving suggestions based on the children's best interest, but they haven't had any contact with the children for half a year. Keep documentation. You need to know what they are required to do in order to know when they deviate from those requirements. Don't go accusing them of that. Don't go making a big deal about it, but write it down in case your attorney can use it at the right time.
Exactly. Yeah,
So,
good point.
Forewarned is forearmed. You are going to get an honorary PhD in stuff you never wanted to have to know. And it's 2 extra full-time jobs to just keep track of it all. It sucks. It's just reality. And that's why we're here.
One of the important things to know is that as devout people of faith, when we go through these custody evaluations, they are not what we expect. And if you don't know what the evaluator and the court are looking for, you can really hurt your own case. So shooting from the hip, expressing your hurt and anger about the other spouse's betrayals and abuse may absolutely backfire and reduce your parenting time with your own children. So let's talk about why. Okay, here we go.
Yeah.
Discussion question A. We hear in our groups that most members are required to share child custody 50-50, which means that each parent gets roughly half of the time with the children, despite the other parent having demonstrated, documented evidence of highly problematic behavior, such as drinking issues or drug use or violent behavior or emotional abuse. And a handful of people in our groups have lost custody entirely, despite having evidence. So why is this happening? If you're a conservative person of faith, we tend to focus on morality, and we're super hard on ourselves. We're very self-critical. And we ask ourselves always, are we behaving in the correct, godly way? We're often very much rule followers who have strived all of our lives to live a righteous and upright life. So most of the members of our groups would say that although they weren't perfect, they weren't the parent with the marriage-destroying sins. Although we may have yelled and slammed doors, we weren't the ones who betrayed the marriage covenant through adultery, abuse, violence, viciousness, selfishness, addictions, or abandonment of duty.
Can I throw something in here?
Go for it.
I know you mentioned adultery, but we have moms who are absolutely brokenhearted because of pornography, explicit sexual content, or sexting, or emotional affairs. And to you, this makes the other parent unfit to be around your children because morally, you wouldn't voluntarily put your children under the influence of someone who is using porn, doing sexually explicit things, consuming content online that would just destroy your children's innocence and that kind of thing. And unfortunately, the court doesn't care. If it's not illegal, the court doesn't care.
Yeah, and that's so
if
shocking.
It's not a crime, the court doesn't care. And waxing eloquent about your pain, their betrayal, their deception, their deceit. Yes, you and I all know it goes to evidence of their character, their integrity, and what you can rely on them to do or not do. We get that. The court, though, doesn't care.
Exactly.
Focusing on that will blow back on you.
Yep. Because the court's values are completely different. Write this down right now. Okay?
Three things.
The court and the way these evaluators are trained. I'm not saying this is right. I'm just saying this is reality. This is how these evaluators are trained, and you're not going to be able to change things. Okay? Sorry. They define a good parent as one who cooperates in co-parenting with the other parent. I know what you're thinking. Helps the child adjust to the court-mandated custody arrangement. That means going to the other parent's house happily and cheerfully, and helps cooperate in parenting the child with kindness, consistent discipline, sensitivity, and acceptance. Now, most of us are pretty good about that third one, but we have a hard time with the first two. About half of the divorces in the United States are due to serious issues like adultery, porn, violence, abuse, addiction, and neglect. So the whole idea of cooperating and co-parenting with this betrayer really grates on us, but that's what the court is looking for. I'm so sorry. And you're going to have to get your mind around it. Okay. And we're going to help you do that. We're going to model some responses for you later on. So the court expects you to attempt to co-parent with someone who habitually betrays, harms, lies, deceives. The court wants you to be a good co-parent, even if the other person is not. Even if the other person doesn't pay child support. My ex did not pay child support for about 4 years. And yet I had to be a perfect co-parent.
And child support and parenting time are considered in the court to be completely separate issues. So the absence of the other parent paying child support on a timely fashion or in a full fashion or even hiding their income is considered completely separate to their rights to time with the children.
Thank you so much for bringing that. You're dead on.
So you can't conflate the two. He's not paying child support. I'm not letting him take our kid for dinner. No, that's not going to be viewed well. It will blow back on you. Can I insert something else here?
Absolutely.
So we're talking about morality and valuing moral behavior. If you have come from a conservative Christian faith community where there are certain lifestyle expectations, I'm just going to paint a profile. This may not be exactly you as you're watching and listening, but there will be things in your life that you can plug into place of the profile that I'm creating. But let's say you're a homeschooling mama. You live out in the country. You've had little to no public media, social media. Your kids don't have phones. They play outside. You didn't have them growing up watching TV. You read books together. And just for good measure, let's throw in, you always have an early bedtime and you eat a really healthy lifestyle. I know a lot of mamas who maybe some of their kids have celiac or their kids have gluten intolerances or dairy intolerances. So they're vegan, home make everything, you do all this organic stuff. This is just a profile, right? So you've got all of these things. You're going through a divorce and your co-parent buys iPads for every single child, drops them in front of Netflix, gives them Cheetos, fries, chicken nuggets. Everything is processed out of a box. And you are about to lose your ever-loving mind because the last decade, 15 years, 5 years, whatever, you've poured into health and lifestyle for your kids' mind, body, and heart is just being destroyed by the person who once was maybe even telling you you needed to raise y'all's kids this way and was enforcing or at least encouraging and on board with this wholesome, grounded lifestyle that you once had. So now they're Disney parent, right? They are indulging the children with everything you have never allowed in your joint home and you still don't allow in your solo home. And the parenting plan evaluator comes in and you want the PPE or the Guardian-ad-Litem to help you get the other parent on board with the way you've both always raised the kids. Stop. And I get it. I was a homeschooling mom with kids with allergies, with autistic children, with kids that had a super structured regular nap time and bedtime and bath time and story time and no TV. And I did a lot of that. And I know mamas who did way more than I ever did. If you fuss about that, it will blow back on you because unless it's illegal, the court does not care about differences in parenting styles. In fact, every bit of your healthy, wholesome, super careful parenting is at risk of being painted by the other parent as controlling, paranoid, conspiracy theorist, and unsafe. So if you focus on that and you're trying to manage the other parent into parenting the same way you do, or parenting the same way they did when you were together, or you did while they were checked out and never involved while you were together, it will destroy your credibility in this process. You cannot fuss about parenting style differences. And that is it's a horse pill to swallow for a concerned and caring mom, especially if you have medically complex or fragile kids, especially if you have kids on the spectrum that need a lot of stability. And we'll talk later about how to go about that. But
No, what you bring up is so absolutely important. You don't have a say about what happens in the other parent's home as long as they're not doing anything illegal. There's no law against being a crappy parent.
yep. And there's no law against them bringing home new partners that may last 6 weeks. There's no law about them having partners sleep over. There's no law that says they have to be a morally upright parent.
Yeah. We value truth and fairness, but here's what you need to get in your mind. The court believes you need to go back to square one, set your differences aside, and focus on cooperative co-parenting, helping your children to adjust, going back and forth between the two homes, and just simply being a good parent. In the court's view, here's how they justify this. You've asked for a divorce and it will be granted. There's no fault divorce, and anyone can get divorced here in the United States. And with the exception of maybe a handful of states, you can unilaterally divorce without the other party's consent. So in the court's view, hey, stop attacking your soon-to-be ex-spouse with accusations and character assassination. Just put it aside, get over it, try to get along for the sake of the kids. Now, fathers' rights groups, if you've never heard of fathers' rights groups, you will when you get into this, and you're going to wonder, wait a second, where is all this new lingo coming from? Fathers' rights groups love to bait protective Christian mothers into showing righteous indignation, what they call spewing venom. No kidding. I actually heard this phrase used in the training I attended earlier this year. When you call your ex-husband a narcissist, they applaud and use that as evidence that you are filled with malice, vitriol, and you are vengeful and angry. When you, as a fit, protective mother, demand that the father have no custody at all, they see it as evidence that you are unreasonable, that you're hysterical, and you are poisoning the children against a decent man who maybe wasn't the best father, but he was doing his best. Okay? That's how the court sees it, because they are strongly affected by fathers' rights groups. And frankly, I see a lot of that in the AFCC literature as well. Now, you are in a battle for the favor of the judge. He or she may have been educated by the AFCC and the other organizations to view your protective behavior as hostile behavior that is damaging to the children and bringing conflict into their lives. All right. What else do you want to say about that, Sarah?
Something that's really important to know about the 50-50 presumption that 30 years ago, 20 years ago, even, there was the tender years doctrine where courts assumed that children, especially younger children, needed to just be with mom. That time is past. So if you've heard, oh, courts always give the kids to mom. No, they don't. And a big part of the 50-50 presumption is based on two things. One is that in the name of equality, dads have the parental right to just as much time and access to the children as moms do. Granted, this presumption is not based on whether or not the children are equally safe and at peace with both parents. And I personally believe that in future years, we are going to see longitudinal studies that show profound harm to children from having no sense of place, where it's just 50-50 back and forth, where you're just a nomadic kid living with a suitcase between two different houses and you don't have your home and your space. But the presumption of the rights of each parent to roughly equal time and access is weighted by the court higher than the presumption of the need for children to be with a primary caregiver and to feel safe and settled. The other big, huge factor that fathers' rights organizations have pushed the 50-50 for is to eliminate or reduce as low as possible the child support obligation of fathers. An entirely different conversation would be that the child support system definitely needs an overhaul. It could probably be scrapped and started all over. But as it stands right now, you have a lot of men who do not want to have child support obligations. Therefore, they will fight for 50% custody because child support is calculated on a rubric of plug in both parents' incomes and then calculate how many overnights, not daytimes, overnights are spent at each parent's house. If the overnights spent at each parent's house are 50-50, it almost eliminates the obligation for the father to pay the mother, or now vice versa. If you have a higher earning mother, sometimes she is stuck paying child support to the father. So you need to be aware that if your heretofore always uninvolved ex has never cared about the kids and now is fighting to have them 50% of the time, very likely his attorney has advised him that is the best way to make sure he never has to pay you a penny in, or the smallest possible amount in child support. And as we're looking at all of this with the co-parenting and the 50-50, I agree you're in a battle for the favor of the judge. But I also want to add, the court doesn't care what's true. It doesn't care. The court only cares what you can prove. If you have documented thoroughly up until this point, that improves your opportunity to show the judge the true character of the other parent. If you have not, start now. And we'll tell you later, I have some tools to help you with that. There are other organizations that have tools to help with that. You don't have to invent the wheel all on your own, but start documenting now, because the court doesn't care what you know to be true. It only cares what you can prove with tangible evidence, paper trails.
Yeah.
So all of that, your desire to make sure your children are safe, you have to recognize that's not the angle the court is taking.
Yeah.
It hurts to say this because I know there are so many protective parents who are brain fogged, scattered, traumatized, terrified. I was one of them at one point.
Yeah.
About
Me too.
how to keep your children safe, how to protect your children from the as much of the fallout of this as you can. And you're also just livid at the betrayal and the deception and the lack of morality. And you have to, in order to get better results, better outcomes, you have to step back from that. You can do one of two things strategically. And I work with strategy clients about this all the time. You can either fight for the system as it should be and try to seek to change the system, and you will lose your case.
Absolutely.
Or you can prepare yourself to understand and navigate the system that is, right or wrong, good or bad. And you will have much better chances at safe, healthy, stable outcomes for yourself and your children if you navigate the system that is. And I want to be very clear that as we're using painful terms, as we're discussing things that are uncomfortable and even discouraging or terrifying to hear, if you're a protective parent that has been drawn into the court system, it is not because we think these things are all okay. It is not because we think the system is fine. I think we can all collectively agree the system is completely broken. It is screwed up. It needs an overhaul. And that will be decades of work. You can advocate for that when your kids are 18. But between now and then, you will get the best outcome and the most safety for your kids and the most peace for yourself and them if you work with a system that is and familiarize yourself with that. The harder you buck the system and try, this is just so unfair, this is unjust, this is wrong, it should not be this way. You're right. It isn't fair. It's toxic. It's unjust. The court doesn't care about morality, and it should, but it doesn't. So you can spend your energy bemoaning and bewailing and just so mad, or you can take all that energy and funnel it into things that will improve your chances in the court system. And I strongly recommend to stop venting about how bad the court system is. It will not help your case.
Absolutely. Yes. Now, discussion question B. Let's go back to where we started. How do you answer the question that the evaluator gives you? Give me 4 parenting skills that the other parent has, when the other parent hasn't been either a good or involved parent in the past. It may be 100% true that the ex-parent may have never changed a diaper, may complain whenever he has to babysit his own children just because you're away at a Bible study that night. Now, brace yourself. Again, we talk about the fathers' rights organizations. They coach fathers to accuse mothers of being so possessive of the children that the mother is acting as a gatekeeper and is not allowing the father to do things with the child. As ridiculous as that may sound to us, most of us would praise God and raise our hands, hallelujah, if he offered to change a diaper or take the kids to the park. But these fathers' rights organizations actually tell the court that we are so possessive, we didn't want the father involved.
I want to bring up a balancing point. I work with mamas. But you know what? Good dads get screwed too. And it seems so often when a parent, a protective parent, male or female, doesn't know the stuff we're talking about, that it feels like they get shafted in the court system in their attempt to protect their child, whether they are a protective father or a protective mother. Now, do we hear a lot more about it with protective mothers? Yes, we do. But I do want to point out that often it seems like the court system simply just gets it wrong. They side with the abuser, or they give the abuser more time. And a lot of that is simply because highly abusive, manipulative, deceptive people, guess what? They know how to play the game. And if you are the truther parent, the one who's just honest and in the trenches and just doing all the parenting things, and you haven't been playing the game all this time, it doesn't matter if you're mom or dad. You're up against someone who's really good at con games. And so good dads get screwed too.
Exactly.
But the plus side is, if you were as good at this game as your ex-partner, then you would be abusive like them, because that's what it takes to naturally be that good at the game. Exactly. You have to educate yourself so that you're not 10 steps behind a person who's been playing the con game all their lives.
Yeah.
And that's what this is about.
Yeah. And you brought up such a good point. Any protective parent, whether it's the father or the mother, the instant they bring up why they need to be protective, which is going to sound to the court like an accusation or an allegation, are proving that they're having a hard time co-parenting. They're showing that they are having a hard time cooperating in co-parenting. And remember, that's one of the #1 values of the court. Now, there are some situations where a mother or father is gatekeeping because of the other parent's genuine illegal behavior. So let's talk about that. There's plenty of people in my group and your group that fall into that category. For example, but not limited to, drunk driving, child molesting, physical violence, really demeaning, humiliating behavior to the child, super harsh discipline. But this is how these evaluators have been trained to explain the fact that the father doesn't have a good relationship with the child. That, oh, the reason he doesn't have a great relationship with the child is because the mother is protecting them too much and not letting him have access to the children.
It's almost like it hasn't occurred to many of these evaluators or the training that it is entirely possible for children to have experienced terrifying or belittling or demeaning or scary things from the parent that would actually influence their own perception of the parent.
Right.
So even if your kids don't want to be with the scary parent, if you're pushing that, or if you're saying that they just don't want to go over there, they're so scared over there. But then they observe a visit with dad. Dad brings a new Barbie or a new Superman thing, and kids' eyes light up and they don't look scared every moment of the time.
And he has cute photographs of them smiling.
Cute pictures. And if the child isn't the one leading that conversation, it will be perceived as you trying to poison the children against the parent that you dislike so much, probably because you caught the parent cheating. And so you're just so mad at them for that porn or that cheating that you don't want the kids to be able to be around them either. And you're willing to destroy the cheating parent's whole life and their whole relationship with their kids just to get back at them. So if you don't have evidence, it's pointless to bring it up, honestly.
Yeah.
If you do have evidence, press charges before you file for divorce.
Absolutely.
And if you're not in the divorce process yet, but you're worried about safety with your children, get your kids in therapy now. Don't wait. Don't wait until something huge has happened. Don't wait until after you've filed for divorce, because then you have to get written permission from the other parent. And if the other parent is actually harming the children, they're not going to want a mandatory reporter talking to your kids every week. Get them into therapy as soon as you can, maintain a stable relationship. And then later, if you do file for divorce, or when you do, the kids are just continuing with the therapist that they've had all this time. And part of maintaining stability is maintaining their ongoing therapeutic relationship with the therapists that are already in place. That way you have a voice for your kids that is not you. If there's domestic violence, DUIs, child abuse, child molestation, and we'll talk about this again more later, criminal information, whatever, press charges on all of that before you file.
And so when Sarah is talking about filing, it could be filing for divorce, it could be filing for legal separation, or I've run across some people in my group who they're married, but they have some kind of almost like a child custody agreement already in place. We're saying any legal document.
Any of those things.
Any of those things goes before court. A lot of people say, should I wait after I file for divorce? No, no, no. Get it all. Get kids in therapy and get everything documented before any kind of legal paperwork is filed at all about child custody.
Fraud, emotional abuse, psychological abuse, financial abuse, everything else becomes suspect to, oh, this is just a vengeful ex. This is just vitriolic. This is just what people do in family court. They just lie about each other because they're just mad at each other. That's what family court's all about.
Yeah. So, yeah. And I actually heard this kind of message given in this AFCC training I took earlier this year. That if the divorce is filed and then it goes to civil or criminal court, that's just vengeful. So do it in advance, like Sarah says. And here's the other unspoken assumption I heard in the AFCC training was that the assumption that every father or mother, and I'm talking about the other parent, the one who you know has got serious issues, that they all truly want a warm and caring relationship with their children, and you are standing in their way. And this is why it's so important, as Sarah says over and over, to have that third-party evidence, law enforcement records, DUIs, drug arrests, violence, medical records, before you start the process,
domestic
if
disputes,
you can.
Domestic assault.
Here's what I want you to ponder. How can you appear to be non-possessive a non-gatekeeping parent, and open to the other parent having a relationship with the kids, and yet be protective of the children. This is the fine line that you need to get your mind around. How am I going to do that? Talk to your attorney about different strategies, and be sure to get one of these high conflict divorce coaches. Sarah McDugal is one of them. She can help you with this. And I've got a long list in my download of other possibilities. One of the things you're going to have to do is really make sure that when you want to blow off steam, because I'll tell you, it's normal to be fearful and angry through this process. Talk privately with your therapist or your good, mature friends. Do not say a word in front of your children, because even overhearing you can be considered by the parenting plan evaluator to be poisoning them against the other parent.
But do not vent to your children's therapist.
Oh, good point. And why not?
Your therapist has confidentiality between you and them. Your children's therapist will have confidentiality waived by the court, because the PPE, the evaluator, or the Guardian-ad-Litem can come show their credentials. They do not need a release of information waiver from you to be able to access everything that your children's therapist has documented, recorded, session notes, etc. So if you vent to your children's therapist, that will get to the evaluator.
Now, I often have people in my group, and you probably find it in your group, saying, I'm going to educate the judge about what narcissists are and what narcissism is. And I'm going to go through the DSM, the diagnostic manual, and I'm going to go through the traits of a narcissist, and I'm going to really educate them. That's what I'm up against. Oh, yeah, no. It's good for you to be educated, right? But it's probably best that you not lecture a powerful court judge. You've divorced only one, hopefully, only one narcissist in your life, but they've seen a million lying, manipulative, violent people in their court. And you're going to come across as arrogant and unlikable if you try to educate a judge. Now, there is a clever solution. You may want to order an anonymous educate your judge packet to be sent to your judge or your attorney or the Guardian-ad-Litem or the custody evaluator in your case. It will be sent anonymously without any connection to your case, and the return address simply says high conflict education and resources. So of course they're going to want to open that. That's where they live all day long. So I've got in the download the website where you can go and order the educate your judge packet. Now, if there is no diagnosis by a professional psychiatrist or psychologist, someone with special training and a PhD who has done hours of face-to-face interview with the other parent and extensive testing, you cannot label the other parent as a narcissist, borderline personality disorder, or paranoid personality disorder, or any other diagnosis. Don't even bring up a checklist of narcissistic traits from the DSM. Instead, describe how their actions affect the children and how their actions affect your ability to co-parent together. Describe a scene, a specific incident of how it plays out, what they say, their body position, how the children feel, what they say and do, how they shrink down, how they want to run, how they start twisting their hair, whatever it is, to show how the other parent's actions and behaviors affect the children and your ability to co-parent together. Now, sadly, it may not be enough that your ex has admitted to you and even your pastor of having a drug or alcohol problem or being attracted to children. The court may require third-party evidence, mainly law enforcement, and it will consider victims' testimonies, witnesses, licensed professionals, school administrators, and testing, but they aren't likely to take your word for anything. And beware about calling on your pastor to testify on your behalf.
Can I
because
just interject? Just
yeah,
don't.
just don't. Okay.
Just
And
don't.
why? It's because they are so anti-divorce, they may just downplay your ex's illegal behavior, even if they sympathize with you. Pastors are really may not
Or
be helpful.
they'll claim virgin confidentiality about disclosures your ex has made about minor attracted proclivities or going to prostitutes or whatever bad things he's done. You'd have to sue them to get it overturned, but they can refuse to testify or water it down out of clergy confidentiality. But you aren't a psychiatrist. And in court, remember, nobody gives a darn what's true. The only thing that matters is what you can prove. So unless there is a formal psych evaluation with formal diagnoses from a qualified professional, PhD level or MD, that is on paper and you have access to it, do not use top psychology terms about your ex, your mother-in-law, your ex-father-in-law, your ex's family. Don't use it with friends. Don't use it with relatives. Don't use it within earshot of your kids. And definitely don't come in spouting all of the TikTok pop psychology terms to your lawyer, to your kids' counselors, or anyone that might ever be interviewed by the court, and definitely not to an evaluator or a guardian-ad-litem, because it makes it look like you are the combative, aggressive one. You look like you're on the smear campaign. You may be doing it out of just the relief of revelation, but it makes it look like you are the one on a smear campaign.
One of the reasons we talk about your attorney so much is your attorney has probably got 10, 20, even 30 years of appearing before that judge and maybe even working with that parenting plan evaluator or the guardian-ad-litem. Now, there is a difference because guardians-ad-litem are allowed to give you parenting advice, whereas the AFCC tells parenting plan evaluators that they are not. So they're not supposed to be telling you how to co-parent. They are supposed to be investigators. They're supposed to be forensic. They're not your friend, and they're not trying to help you. In fact, if they act overly friendly, I can see that you don't have any mental health defects. They may be trying to lure you to drop your guard and say some nasty things about the other parent. And when I say nasty things, I mean true things about the other parent, and start calling them names. You don't even have to
be lying, but.
Now we're going to shift directions very dramatically for the next discussion question. Sarah especially has mentioned CSAM, child sexual abuse material. If you find sexual photos of minors, whether real or created via AI, on your ex's computer, report them to the Center for Missing and Endangered Children, preferably before the divorce again, right? Don't send the images to your attorney, or guess what? Now you are transferring illegal images to others. You're part of the child porn industry. There is a cyber tip line. It's report.cybertip.org. There's no www in there. Report.cybertip.org. Go there. You can talk to someone at the Center for Missing and Endangered Children, and they will walk you through how to handle the situation. Okay, here's our next question. What if the other parent is genuinely into something illegal like drug or alcohol or substance misuse? They don't say he's an addict. So the AFCC wants you to call it drug or alcohol misuse. I know that you guys your eyes are going to roll so much, you're going to just about knock yourself out when you hear this next one. The court wants you to hope that change is possible and that this divorce has been a wake-up call for the other parent. You need to get your mind around that. Very often, they don't want to give you sole custody. They want you to agree to a stepped-up plan where the other parent will earn more time with the child as they increase their sobriety and stay out of trouble. So depending on the judge and depending on the custody evaluator, if you reject this notion of a stepped-up plan, you may be viewed by these very powerful people as refusing to co-parent, which is the number one value of the court. So you need to say, tell me more about how would this stepped-up plan work? Would there be a breathalyzer? Would there be tests like hair follicle testing or fingernail clipping testing to make sure that the other parent truly is clean and sober right now? And that's just the reality. You can't get sole custody on the basis of the fact that they're an addict, because the court really wants to give them a chance to rehabilitate themselves.
So, a really great way to discuss that, ask yourself this question: all things being equal, if the other parent was safe, stable, and healthy, would you want your child to have a thriving relationship where the relationship and your child are also both safe, stable, and healthy? And I would hope that the answer is, of course I would. We wouldn't be here if the other parent was safe, stable, and healthy. I wouldn't have divorced him if he wasn't dangerous or whatever it is that fits
Right.
your personal story. Think about it from that perspective. So right now it's not safe, but I really want it to be a great relationship whenever it is safe. So
Right.
what can I do to help make sure my kid is safe? And then what can we do to make sure the other parent is safe when they're with my child?
In fact,
And
that brings up a great point. And so when you're asked, tell the evaluator 4 positive parenting traits of the other parent, you can say, my kids love getting ice cream at Dairy Queen with daddy. And as long as he's sober enough to drive, it works out great. So you're
they
saying,
love having movie night over at his house. As long as he's not high, it's been really good. If they genuinely want what's best for children, then when you make a comment, like Gretchen said, as long as he's not drunk when he's driving, they love going to get ice cream with him. Then the other person's natural response is, oh my word, we can't have him driving drunk with the kids. And now they're wanting to protect your kids.
right.
But if your approach is, he can't even be trusted to take them for ice cream, they're like, why not? You're so freaking controlling. Can you see the difference between the two approaches?
Okay, next discussion question. What if I, the fit protective parent, have been diagnosed with major chronic depression or some other mental or physical issues? Mental illness is part of our culture. Does that count against me? Now, some people genuinely have a regular medical and psychiatric problem. From the trainings that I've taken part of, the presenters always suggest that as long as you're getting regular medical and psychiatric attention, and as long as you come across as sensible, reasonable, compassionate to your children, and are following in medical advice. So one possible example is, are you taking your own meds consistently? And as long as it's not negatively impacting your ability to care for your child, it should not reduce your parenting time. Now, I want to tell one personal story. I saw this happen once to a good friend that I had known from my youth. And as a young mother in her 30s, she came from a family with a lot of mental health problems. She started experiencing psychosis when she wasn't on her meds, and she would just stop taking her meds. She would speak very confidently, but she had really lost touch with reality, and the judge had no choice but to give custody of her child during that hearing to her alcoholic ex-husband. It was absolutely tragic. But had she been taking her meds and really seeking regular medical attention, I'm not sure she would have lost custody. I could be wrong, but just be aware that you need to stay on top of your own medical and psychiatric conditions. And what if I have neurodivergent kids, or I'm neurodivergent? Or what about if my kids have what the court calls SNC, special needs children, then what I do. Now, I know this is your area of expertise, so you go first and then I'll put in my 2 cents.
Okay, I think that there's a number of factors in this basket. If you have a mental health situation that is current and ongoing, then you need to be able to show how you're getting help. Because remember, again, the goal of a parenting evaluator is to maximize both parents' access to the children as much as possible. So you want to not hide your diagnoses, but not make a big deal out of them either. If you are asked about them, answer. You don't have to flaunt them or make them front and center. Just be honest. Yes, I've struggled with that. I take whatever medication you take. I have a therapist. I'm actively involved in the things that keep me stable because my top priority is being there for my kids. That's really all you need to say right there. If you have a physical disability, then you need to be able to show how you have managed parenting all of this time up till now and how you intend to continue managing parenting fine. There are all kinds of homes and families and children where one parent is disabled or even both parents are disabled. I know of children who are hearing who are raised by both deaf parents. There are children who are raised by parents in wheelchairs. There's all kinds of family situations. You need to be able to show that you love your child, that your home is reasonably clean and organized and is a safe environment, so there's no negligence, that you're able to provide your child's needs, and that you have a good relationship with your child. And most of that is visibly obvious to the person. And you don't need to belabor the points, because if that is true about your situation, then your house will be reasonably clean, your child will be reasonably clean and well clothed, you will be able to show proof of your financials or whatever, and that's all going to just be there. You don't have to really drive that point home. If you are having neurodivergent kids, this is where Gretchen says I have a lot of background. I'm autistic. I have 2 autistic kids and ADHD and a number of other diagnoses. I have one child who also has a number of medical complications and has had to have significant surgical interventions and other things, and ongoing juggling doctor's appointments and therapist appointments. And I don't mean just counselors, but other types of therapy and checkups and a bunch of specialists and that kind of thing. So that's been my life for a very long time, kind of thing. If your child has a life-threatening allergy, like I know of parents who have a child that will go into anaphylactic shock at a peanut or dairy or something like that, and the other parent is just totally negligent. You want to point out medical records of how severe this is so that the evaluator is aware that this is a life or death situation, and you can show what you do in your home. A trained evaluator will then be asking the other parent what they do about that once they know that's an issue. You don't need to say what the other parent doesn't do. They'll be asking, they'll be looking for that. If you are dealing with neurodivergent children and they have not been diagnosed, for the love, get your kids diagnosed. Because you can't advocate for their special needs if there's no paperwork stating that they have special needs. Then I think the last thing that I want to bring up is, what if you are neurodivergent, autistic or ADHD or whatever, you've gotten the diagnosis. Some parents are scared to get the diagnosis because they're afraid it will blow back on them and their ex or the court will tell them you're not fit to be a parent because you have this disability or disorder. Again, remember, the court wants both parents to have access to the children and parenting time as much as possible. So as long as all other things being equal, you are presenting as a fit and healthy, caring and loving parent. I can tell you what happened. This is my experience. I'll tell you what happened When I was asked by a very adversarial opposing counsel, you say you're autistic. Yes. Isn't it true that gets in the way of you being able to take care of your kids? And my answer was no. It means that I can understand and advocate for my children better than any neurotypical parent ever could, because I know exactly what they need, because I understand where they're coming from. Bam. Shifted direction, never asked me again.
Fabulous answer. Thank you. In fact, I wanted to say something. In the AFCC training I went through, the presenter for this particular section on special needs children said, if there's a special needs child in this particular home that you're evaluating, you need to bring in an expert. You shouldn't be handling it yourself. So just be aware that's what's being taught right now by AFCC. Okay, switching gears again. Our next discussion question. My ex has sent me demeaning or threatening texts, emails, or voice messages, including one that says I will never see my child again if I continue with the divorce. What do I do? Number one, save those messages. Do not hit delete. They are absolutely fabulous evidence that the other parent's behaviors and accusations are making co-parenting difficult, right? You don't need to answer these accusations, but you do need to save them. Now, will the evaluator ask for them? Maybe not, but you still have them in your back pocket in case you ever need them. There's a lot of people in my group that will say, hey, my ex sent me this message. It's a horrible, demeaning, nasty message or filled with innuendo and false accusations. You need to get educated about the messages you do need to respond to and those you don't need to respond to. I'm sure Sarah has training on that. One of my favorite books is Tina Swithin's book called The Narc Decoder. Basically, she helps you determine which bucket the messages fall into. In short, accusations about you, nope, you don't need to answer those. Logistics about the children, medical questions about the children, yes, you do need to. And she models for you. She actually gives you phrases you can use for each kind of message. So you can save yourself a lot of court time and a lot of problems if you just pick up her book, The Narc Decoder. It's a very funny read too. It's hysterically funny, but she really does help you knowing and models for you exactly what to say to the other parent.
It's super helpful. And if you haven't picked that book up yet, in between now and when you do, a really good baseline to remember is that you don't need to respond to or justify anything that isn't true.
Good point.
So, accusations, allegations, rants, you're so terrible, this, whatever, ignore everything that isn't true. The only things you need to respond to are things that are true with a direct question related to your children or an asset or whatever. There may be 5 paragraphs of terrible rant that just gets your stomach boiling. And it's awful, lies and trashing you. It's terrible. Ignore it.
Save it.
Save it. Oh, save it. Don't just save it in your text thread, because now there are a number of phone types where people can go back and edit things and delete stuff. And you want to screenshot it and save it. I have a binder system that helps you with that. That is super helpful in case you don't know where to start. But that is something you need to screenshot and save in multiple places.
Absolutely.
So that you don't lose it. Organize those. Date, time, hashtags, topics, type of attack, whatever. Do not reply to those, because the minute you start telling them how wrong they are, they have something to show the evaluator or the judge or the therapist about how you are just as high conflict as they are. You are just as ornery and angry and mad as they are. You are just as difficult and vindictive as they are. And then it just becomes, he did this and she did that, and they're equal. These two people just need to grow up and learn how to work it out. But let's say there's 5 paragraphs of god-awful stuff. And then somewhere in there is something about your children's uniforms for school. All you do is reply, here's the link to the uniform store, and the code for the school is XYZ to see their uniform shop. That's it. Not, oh my word, you are such a ridiculously lazy parent. I can't believe you're asking me to give you the link that you could have gotten from the school secretary, but just to be nice, here it is. I'm never doing this for you again. No, 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 no. This is where you write like an HR director.
And I love what you just brought up. At this stage in the game, you're always figuring that the judge is standing right over your shoulder, watching everything you write. So you must come across very objective, non-inflammatory. The court wants to see this polite, considerate wording. We talk about gray rock, but you might want to even do yellow rock or orange rock. Let's say that the other parent wants to know when the school parent-teacher conference is. And you might be tempted to say, hey, you have the school calendar and website. Why don't you figure it out yourself? I'm not your secretary. Instead, you pretend like the judge is looking over your shoulder, or the custody evaluator is checking to see whether you are good at co-parenting, you're cooperative. You say, it's at the parent-teacher conference is at 7 p.m. on Tuesday in classroom 10. Here's a link to the school's website. And by the way, I've made sure you're on the school's email list. This makes you look like the world's best co-parent. And that is what the court wants to see.
Just write like it'll be read out loud in court someday.
Yeah.
You want it to be as factual and emotion-free as absolutely possible. You're writing so that a judge or an evaluator can read it and see at a glance how different you are from the writing of the abusive parent. And the moment they bait you and you try to tell them how they're wrong, you have lost that contrast. Yeah. So my advice with this is when you are entering into this process, or even if you're a little ways further in and you're upside down, make sure you get the better lawyer, not the cheapest lawyer. Exactly. It may cost more on the front end, but it will save you hundreds of thousands of dollars in the long run, potentially. Yep. And get the strategy coaching, get high conflict divorce coaching, get clarity and strategy coaching, get whatever it is you need to even get the most out of your lawyer, because lawyers are not therapists and they do not handhold. They are not going to teach you step by step about the court system and how to get the most out of your case. I have an ebook and a workbook on how to get the best divorce attorney to save your kids, and 101 questions of what you should know about an attorney before you sign a contract with them.
Super. Yeah, that's great. Okay. How do I get educated on what these evaluators want to see, and are there any pitfalls? Okay. So I'm going to use the AFCC term. In addition to simply being a good parent to your child, which is number one, really knowing them, understanding them, knowing what they're like when there's happy, sad, mad, whatever, you want to make sure you are not alienating the child, meaning poisoning the children against the other parent. You also want to make sure you are not unjustly gatekeeping to block the other parent's access to the child. And you want to make sure you don't appear so enmeshed with the children that they don't have a relationship with the other parent for fear of hurting your feelings. In other words, you need to walk that tightrope. There are ways to protect your children from a destructive other parent without calling them narcissists and without blocking them from spending time. Now, of course, if there is illegal behavior, you do want to bring up the third-party evidence. As Sarah showed how to be diplomatic, I'm not really sure if this law enforcement, this police report would be of any help to you. Would you like to see it?
I just want to let you determine whether or not it's of help to you.
Exactly. With that sweet little smile. Then there is a list of phrases that evaluators are listening for to determine if you are the one who's creating the problems with co-parenting. If you're the one who's making it hard for the children to go to the other parent's house. If you're causing the children to demean and reject the other parent. So let me give you some examples. And I've got the whole list in the show notes to download. Okay, so for example, calling the children my children rather than our children. Now, I know this is completely natural, so you're going to have to practice in the mirror. Oh, our children. So our children really going to this restaurant. Our children really enjoy doing this at the county fair. Okay, don't say my children. Second one is if you show that you always have a 100% negative attitude about your ex, even if deserved, if you show that you are incapable of saying anything good about them, you're really destroying your own case. Third, be careful about talking about how much time you spend with your children and how close you are. I'm sorry, this is the truth. There's no doubt you're closer to your children than the other parent, okay? But just show that you know what their favorite color is, what their preferences are, what their favorite foods are. That's how you show that you're close to your children without using the word close. When I went through my psych eval with my ex-husband, the final report said, you know what? These children really don't know what their father's favorite food or color or restaurant are. These children don't really know their father. And I thought that was really interesting. And that's how he made his evaluation. That was one of maybe 100 factors in making his decision that I would continue to retain sole custody in the state of California. Here's another one. If it doesn't seem to the evaluator that you have any identity in your life other than being a mother, of cooking, cleaning, and educating your children, that actually goes against you. You need to look like you have other things in your life besides your children, other interests, other hobbies, other women's groups, other
So
book studies.
this is why conservative Christian mamas, especially earthy, wholesome, conservative homeschooling Christian mamas who have made family their entire life purpose, get shafted in these kinds of things, because what was your best in your church community is now considered a negative in the court system.
Exactly. Talk about the fun things you do with other adult women. That's a great, and show that you have other friends, that
You're
your life.
taking a course, or you're going back to school, or you've got a part-time job, or you have a great hobby, all of those things. Ways
Absolutely.
that you're bettering yourself as an
Yeah.
adult.
I'm not going to list the next point because we have belabored this so much. Basically, if there's no illegal behavior that the other parent is doing, the court doesn't care. The court doesn't care about their adultery, about their shacking up with a new chickie. They don't care about any of that stuff. They don't care that they introduced, this is a big thing in my group. Oh, my ex-husband introduced the children to his side chick just 2 weeks after starting to date. Guess what? The court doesn't care. Don't make this a big deal. Okay. All right. Now, that evaluator will do a home visit and safety and health check. Like Sarah talked about before, it doesn't matter if you're physically disabled, if you're in a wheelchair, but you better make sure that the food in your refrigerator didn't expire last year, that you have good, wholesome food in your fridge that is easy for the children to get to. No mold.
Yeah, that doesn't mean that it needs to be fancy and organic. It means if you're making your kids Kraft mac and cheese and your kids are fed and they look healthy and they're clean and they're well groomed, that's fine.
Yep, exactly. Exactly. Okay, next question. Can I keep my ex from getting any custody? Can I demand sole or full custody?
Oh, Gretchen, I read this and I wrote a note in at the top underneath this question. If you go into custody aiming for this, you're going to lose.
Absolutely.
If
Yep.
that's your bottom line, if that's your goal, you will lose it. You will lose that battle.
If there isn't law enforcement, police reports, child protective services reports, yeah, don't even try that.
Even when there is, you still need to take the perspective of, I want my kids to have the best possible relationship with their other parent.
Right.
I just want to make sure that they're safe and stable and healthy in the process. Because in the United States, now there are other countries that are ahead of us in this. UK, Australia is working on a lot of legislation around coercive control and sex offender parents. But in the United States, I believe that, unless I'm wrong, Gretchen, correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe that in every single state, a convicted sex offender, even a convicted child sex offender, there is no carve out saying that they can't have full custody and retain all their parental rights to their own children. They can be a child rapist and they can still get out of prison and move in to the same house with their own minor children.
Yeah,
There
we've
is
we've got people in our group who've had that happen to them. You
same.
know, there was actually a
So
court case and they were arrested and incarcerated, and when they got out, they moved back home. And it was the view of the court
parental
that they
rights are
paid their.
still there.
We haven't said it this way, but this is a marathon and not a sprint. This is
Yes.
going to take patience to show to the Guardian-ad-Litem or to the child custody evaluator that other person, when given the opportunity to be a good parent, consistently chooses to be a bad parent. And they have to hang themselves. It's really difficult for us to hang them.
You're walking around holding a noose over their head, then you look like an executioner,
Yeah.
not a good parent.
Yeah, yeah. Now, Sarah and I have seen there are times that you can get sole custody or full custody right out the gate. And a lot of times that's because maybe your ex just doesn't even want to put up a fight in court. They just walk away. It's too much
Right.
for them. They want to move on. They want to marry their next honey and move to another state and just get out of there and call it quits. And that happens to some people. Another thing that happens, and I want to say right up front, the judge is not going to like this, but there are some people who have traded financial assets for child custody. This is not something the court condones, but if you and your ex agree to it outside of the court and you have your attorney put in some very special language to protect you in the future, don't do this on your own. Don't sign anything. You can talk, but don't sign anything without your attorney looking it over. It can work.
Don't put that proposal in writing either. Talk that over with your attorney. And if the other parent is agreeable to this verbally, then you can do some kind of agreement about it that is in writing, of course, and is a signed legal stipulated agreement, a legal document that's binding. But your proposal to offer that as an option to the other parent should not be texted or emailed to them.
That's a very good point. Thank you.
Because if, let's say, you do that, you think it's a good time, you do that, and then later they don't agree to it, they're like on the fence about it, something else happens, and a year or two later, you get assigned an evaluator. And then they come out with your text messages from a couple of years ago saying, if you'll just walk away from the kids, I won't chase you for child support. And that looks really bad to the evaluator. So don't go trying to negotiate that on your own or in writing. Only do that if your lawyer says that it is the right time.
And there are ways that this can come back and bite you. There needs to be some extra language to protect you. Okay, now here's one more thing. I've got links to all the standards, AFCC's standards for Guardians-ad-Litem, for parenting plan evaluators, for co-parenting coordinators. I'm going to give you links to all of those. It is standard. It is practically required for the evaluator to interview your child and ask for their wishes about custody. It is also completely typical for them to believe that the child's answers have been coached by you or the other parent or both of you, or that the child is too young to have a clear concept of what they want. So make sure you do want to be aware that they're supposed to ask your child. But at the same time, just be aware that they could throw it out. You do not want to be coaching your children. If you say anything to your children, just say, tell the evaluator the truth.
You keep telling your child to keep expressing the truth, to keep reporting what happens. You give them tools to understand safety, how to call 911 if they're scared, how to have a voice. You keep being a safe parent for your child. And eventually, the tables will turn. It may take years.
Yeah. It took years for
But
you. It took years for me.
yes.
Yep. Next question. This is a fast one. Do you have any good case studies or examples of a fit, protective father or mother who have done this well in the face of a destructive or dangerous ex-spouse? I like Tina Swithin of One Mom's Battle. She tells her story publicly. She was genuinely afraid for her children's lives and safety when they were with their father. It was a 10-year battle to document how her ex's actions were negatively affecting the children. That's that documentation notebook that Sarah was talking about. And hampering cooperative co-parenting. And eventually the court terminated the father's parental rights. I've got the link to that in the handout. Second, I do have a father's story. So on my own YouTube channel, I have a 2-part interview totaling 2 hours and 40 minutes with a father, a fit, protective father who tells his whole story. He had a highly destructive ex-wife who, after filing for divorce, abducted their children, fled to another state, alienated them against their dad, poisoned them against their dad, and totally, obviously, ticked off the judge. And you'll notice in this interview how David, that's a fake name, but David refuses to badmouth his ex-wife. And he's a wonderful, he models perfectly how you need to look to a parenting plan evaluator. Whenever speaking about his ex-wife in her parenting role, he always portrays her as being, quote, a very good mother to small children. Now, his children are teenagers now, but he always calls her a very good mother to small children. The ex-wife eventually cooperated with the court after many incidents of contempt of court, bad behavior, and she was able to maintain her parental rights. They've not been terminated. But he shows how he played the long game. His story is so powerful and so shocking that I lost 3 nights of sleep after interviewing him. His story was just so absolutely shocking to me.
You mentioned that she abducted the children, fled to another state. Probably every week, I get comments either in my groups or someone messaging me wanting to know what's the process for them to just disappear, take the kids and run, go to another state, try to start over. And just don't.
Don't.
That is a fast track to losing your kids, even if there's criminal behavior in place, even if you have really good reason to go, even if you feel like it's your only option. It is not. It is no longer 1967 where you can just, I don't know, pack up and move to Wyoming and start over working for cash tips at a diner in some small town and nobody will ever know the difference. You can't disappear in today's world. And I have a whole unit on this in my crash course for prepping for court. But in short, don't leave the state unless you have permission temporarily to go on vacation with your kids elsewhere from a lawyer. If your lawyer hasn't said, yes, you are okay to leave the state if you do XYZ, inform your ex, tell him where you'll be, blah, 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 blah. Or you have a protective order that specifies that you are free to leave the state. If you don't have those things in place, do not pack up your kids and go to grandma's 6 states away or fly to your sister's somewhere else or do any of those kind of dramatic things. You are guaranteeing a harder time even keeping your natural 50 custody of your children.
Yeah. Yeah. And what we need to make clear is if you need to get to safety and move in with your parents in another state, do that before any legal paperwork is filed. Do that before you file for divorce, before you file for legal separation, or even make some kind of formal agreement with your ex for support while you're out of state. Just go before any legal documentation is filed. And then you're their mother, so you can take them. Married parents can do anything they want to with joint funds, with their joint children. They can do anything they want to. So if you're going to go before.
Sure.
I'm glad you brought that up. Next question, and it's right down your alley, Sarah. Will I have to stop homeschooling, put my kids in daycare or in public school, and go get a job? What do you say to that?
Possibly yes.
And
Possibly
why?
you are going to have to show in nearly every case that you are able to financially provide for your children on your time. Exceptions to that would be if you already had a written binding agreement or a traceable written agreement between you and the other parent, that the other parent's individual wealth is earmarked to make sure that you can stay home full time with the children until the children are older teenagers or have turned 18. There are all kinds of really creative and cool ways that mamas who are determined to homeschool find ways to make it work. But in general, your best bet is to put your children in school and get a job.
You're talking public school.
Unless someone is going to pay for them to go to private school, or maybe you have a church that has a scholarship fund and your kids can get a full ride. Again, there are lots of creative ways, but put your children in a brick and mortar school. And there is more than one reason to do this. If your kids are in school, guess what? He is bound by the third-party school's school schedule. Your children have teachers involved. If the children come unkempt and unwashed and smelling and torn or dirty clothes or terrible food, no lunches from his house, you have a dozen teachers observing that behavior who are then now mandatory reporters for suspected neglect, abuse, and other things in your children's lives. You have outside eyes. If you have your children in a brick and mortar school, he can't come and just sign them out anytime he feels like it based on whatever his whims are. They have to be in school.
Good point. Okay, we're going to wind this up going through lightning round some general tips. One of the greatest things I learned at this AFCC training was that there is a brand new co-parenting app. Because if you're divorcing a person who lies, stonewalls, claims they never saw a text, never saw an email, or that they sent one and you just didn't see it or you accidentally deleted it, you need a co-parenting app that makes it really difficult for them to falsify records and to falsify and to fake that they never read your email. It actually shows what day and time they read your email.
I can't emphasize this enough. As soon as you realize that you got difficulties, stop verbally communicating on anything. Don't make any verbal agreements. Don't make any verbal expectations. Don't share things verbally with the other parent. Keep it all in writing.
Yeah, and do it through a co-parenting app. One of the things I learned about is a brand new co-parenting app. I learned about this in the AFCC training, and it's called civilcommunicator.com. It is really expensive. It is $400 per parent per year. And if you have the money, it can be incredibly worthwhile because it's monitored by human beings, live people who call balls and strikes and will document the other parents and your poor co-parenting communication. And they say, this is vicious, this is manipulative, this is hearsay, this is stonewalling, okay? And they produce a report that can be shown in court. It's unbelievable. One of the women in my group shared her reports from civilcommunicator.com. Unbelievable. It was amazing. However, the old favorite, OurFamilyWizard, which is about $150 per year per parent.
But you can get a scholarship for that if your kids are on Medicaid, if you get
Oh,
legal aid or pro bono, or if you've been approved by a hospital system or a medical system for like pro bono or write-off medical care, you can submit that. They have an online application process and you can get approved to waive their fee.
awesome. Okay, so OurFamilyWizard, AppClose is another one, free, but not mentioned by the AFCC. Talking Parents is free for their web version. Their mobile app version is just free for the first month and then about $10 thereafter. So that's one general tip. Go for the co-parenting app. Second, if your ex has already started alienating the children against you, saying horrible things about you, you may want to change your disciplines tactics. Normally, you want to curb their behavior when they do something wrong. There are different tactics to use. I've got it in the download, the link. Another one is, we've mentioned it before, but get that high conflict divorce coach to help you prepare for child custody evaluation. Go through the checklists I mentioned, the checklist of all the facts they want to gather, the checklist about how to prepare your home for the home visit. Familiarize yourself with the concept of alienation so you can protect yourself from accusations. I've got a link to that. And bottom line, I won sole custody. Sarah basically has her children with her full time now, and she's been able to keep them safe. It can be done. It is a long, slow road, and you have to be very good at documenting. But I hope that this intro has been, I know it's been like drinking from a fire hose, and we've shared a huge amount. But this is what you need to know so that you can get out of your own mindset and get into the court's mindset. That's when you really have a chance to win and do what's best for your children. Thank you for listening to the video. For the full version, which is over 2.5 hours long, go to Sarah's website. With Sarah's extensive expertise in areas like homeschooling, special needs children, neurodiverse parents, families facing mental health or physical challenges, and criminal behavior, the full workshop offers specialized insight. Additionally, Sarah helps you understand how professional evaluators and Guardians-ad-Litem might view your case, equipping you to present yourself as positive and solution-focused as possible rather than defensive. Having the right mindset during evaluations can make all the difference, and Sarah's full workshop provides the essential strategies to ensure that you're prepared. Send her an email at sarah@wilderness2wild.com to get access, and see www.wilderness2wild.com/court for her protective parent case prep tools. If you benefited from this recording, you will find support and clarity in my book, The Life-Saving Divorce, available in paperback or Kindle on Amazon. You can also follow me, Gretchen Baskerville, online at lifesavingdivorce.com or on Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, or Instagram. You can sign up for my email list at lifesavingdivorce.com. Women and men of faith may request to join my private online Facebook group, Life Saving Divorce Private Group. For more on life-saving divorces, please subscribe and click the link to the next recording.